Hello, Dr. J. Smith. Now it is the 26th of November. A few minutes ago, Dr. Yasir Qadhi put out a chat number 10, which was a response to J. Smith and David Wood, a response to what we have been saying concerning him, and quoting him, as he says, illegally quoting and using his name. It was about 51 minutes long, and what I'd like to do now, since I've just seen it and I took 2 pages of notes on it, 1 and 2, I'd like to go through some of the things he said, and I would like to respond. This is one of the great things about YouTube. He uses YouTube. He has, 388,000 subscribers. I don't know how many people have watched this. There will be tens of thousands, I'm sure, that will watch this, and many Muslims will say, finally, Yasir Qadhi has really shut down Jay Smith and David Wood and Daniel Brubaker. It turns out that he actually confronted all three of us. Although he didn't really say much about David Wood, it was mostly myself and Daniel Brubaker that he confronted. But it was fascinating. Let me just go through as I go down through these notes, and I have some things to pull back. One of the, as I said, as I was starting to say, the YouTube is a terrific vehicle because you can get peer-reviewed immediately. And in some ways, what Yasir Qadhi has done is a peer review. He's peer reviewing us, and now I'm going to peer review him. We'll go right back at him. This doesn't have to take months to write it in a journal like it does in academia. Because it's on YouTube, we can go immediately. And I hope those of you who are watching that you do hear what I'm saying. Take it on board. There's an awful lot of words that Yasir Qadhi used that were quite strong. I'm not going to use those kind of words. I don't think it's appropriate. Certainly, I don't feel towards him like he feels towards us. He called us evil. He said that we're untrained, we're unqualified, we're a disgrace to academia. And then he says, I'm going to just do a smackdown here. I'm going to do a smackdown. And I was fascinated because I was waiting for the smackdown to happen. I didn't really see it happen. I really didn't understand what his problem was because he did actually go to our material on him. Fascinating. I'm going to respond to what he said about me in particular. There were 3 areas that he confronted me with. I'm not going to talk about what he said about David. I'll let David, I'm sure he's going to put up his own video tomorrow. And as far as Dan Brubaker, I'll just say one thing about Dan Brubaker, what he said about Dan Brubaker, and then I'll let Dr. Brubaker do his response to that. And then I'm going to come up with some questions at the very end. So let's go ahead and get started. And what did he say? Well, fascinating. He didn't go to my material on him. He didn't go to the videos where I'm talking about the Qira'at and the Ahruf. He didn't go to any, and there's been a lot up there since June 8th, since that interview that he had with Muhammad Hijab. I have put up quite a few videos, long videos, 2-hour videos. So why didn't he go to that material since it pertained to him specifically, since he thought, since this was this material, since this, I would assume, is what he would want to respond to, because I'm still waiting for his response to much of what we have pulled out. See, it's these books right here. There's the Qira'at. You see them here? I have 8 of them. 8 of these right here. All these 8, not one of them is the same. Oh, here, a 9th. Put that on the top. This is the Hafs. And I would like him to respond now to the claims that he made in that interview. Yeah, you're right. It was only the last 25 minutes, which he has deleted. And he admitted that he was probably wrong in some of the words he said. And that's fine to hear that. I'm glad he's finally admitting that. And I'm glad that that he feels that he had to delete that video. I don't know what good that does, since we all have the video. We can always remind him of it. But fascinating. When he wanted to confront and wanted to see who I was, rather than look at my responses to what he said, or even my responses to the Qira'at and the Ahruf, because that's the information that we're actually confronting him with, he went to some odd videos that were from 1.5 years or even longer that I had done in London. These are ones that I had done as I was traveling through. One of them was over 1 year ago, back in 2019. And he started with that one. He just showed a snippet, which has nothing to do with the subject at hand. And what he must have done, he must have just dove in and then dove out. He didn't actually look at the context of what I was saying. And this really became apparent when we get to the next section. He refers to the 9 provinces that I that I refer to. Now, it's fascinating because if you look at my videos from this year, 2020, I don't talk about 9 provinces. I only talk about 5. And the 5 provinces I refer to are Yathrib, or now what is now known as Medina, Mecca, Basra, Kufa, and Damascus. Didn't mention those. He wanted to go to these 9. A year and a half ago, I did talk about these 9, and he just went on to a tirade and started laughing and cajoling. He says, Jay doesn't even know the names. Oh dear, did he even realize that I'm using modern names? I always use modern names so people know what I'm talking about. Of course, I didn't use the word for Baghdad in the 7th century, or by the time that Muhammad would have been living. In the 7th century, it was known as Ctesiphon. No one would... if I were to say Ctesiphon, then of course none of you knew what I was talking about, because you don't use that today. So I use Baghdad because that is the name that was introduced by the Abbasids in 749 or 750, the mid-8th century. That's true. Remember, if you want to... But then he went to really confronted me on the word Cairo, that I shouldn't have used this because the name that existed at that time was Kahira. Well, that's not true either. That is not the name that was used in the 7th century. And I'm a little surprised that he made this huge error. Kahira is actually the Arabic equivalent to what we would say Cairo today. But Kahira, if you look at it, it was introduced in 968 by the Safavids. But what's fascinating, that is the 10th century, and he did say the 10th century that Cairo was introduced. No, but then he said the word I should use is Kahira. No, Kahira is Cairo. It's the Arabic equivalent to Cairo. What would have been the name in the 7th century? Fustat. Fustat is the name that was used in that city, because remember, it used to be called Memphis, but Fustat is the garrison town outside of the city that the Muslims, or in this case, those that took over and conquered Egypt, that's the word that they would have used, the name. So he even got that completely wrong. Now, I'm not going to sit there and berate him for that, but I'm going to ask him to be careful when he's quoting me. Make sure he quotes me correct. At least we do that with him. Whenever we quote him, we actually film it and put it up there so you can see. And make sure that you understand that when I'm talking about an ancient city, I'm not going to use that name unless I'm specifically referring to the name of the ancient city. I use the modern name today. And that's why it's important that he makes sure that he doesn't put up in this case, it was a straw man, and then he just tried to confront the straw man. He then went and he spent a bit of time on 2 other areas, and they had to do with this material, actually, with this book here, Daniel's book. And it's a video that I put together. I'm thinking it was in May of 2019, so over a year ago. And he made 2 major points on that and really confronted me. The first one is this idea of dumping the Hafs text, that was chosen by Muhammad ibn al-Husayni al-Haddad in 1924. And that I suggested that all the Qurans in the world were dumped in the Nile. I went back to look at the video and I didn't see where I said that. I never said all the Qurans in the world were dumped. He didn't even understand. I guess maybe he just didn't watch the video very carefully, or I don't think he was intentionally trying to misquote me. It was actually a joke. If you notice, we're laughing about it. We're saying, isn't it interesting that they took out the other 29, we're assuming that there were 30 official ones. Hafs had been chosen in 1929 to standardize the test for high school students. High school students were coming and doing standardized tests, and they were coming up with all kinds of different references, Quranic references, that didn't agree. And this is the problem with the Qira'at. That's why they all are so different, and that's why they still are being printed today. So when you memorize it, you want to memorize it with the script that you have grown up with, the script that you have memorized. You want to make sure that there's a printing of it. And so in order to standardize these tests in Cairo, in the city of Cairo, they had to throw out all the others and ask Muhammad ibn al-Husayni Hazrat to choose one, and he chose the Hafs. And then they took the other ones. When I'm saying he took the other ones, the other ones of the high school students there who had brought them to the schools, those were taken out. And this is nothing more than a symbolism. It's symbolic throwing them into the Nile. Of course, no one would suggest, and I don't know where he got this idea that I was making a suggestion that all the Qurans in the world at that time were thrown into the Nile. Anyways, nonetheless, he seemed to make a completely misconstrued. And then he went on and he talked about the Farouk, that this was actually, the story comes from the Farouk edition, which is in 1936, which is then chosen for all of Egypt, that book. And he suggested that had to do with a German scholar. I'm guessing he thinks that that's where the story comes from. No, it doesn't. This story about the standardization, what Dr. Shadi Nasser talks as the fifth canonization. Look at the book that's just come out 2 weeks ago. Dr. Shadi Nasser from Harvard University, who has taught in Yale and has also taught now teaching at Cambridge University, one of the foremost scholars in the world today. He is very clear that there are 5 different canons of the Quran. The first one would be, of course, that which all of us have been told about, Uthman's canon of 652. Interesting, Dr. Shadi Nasser is not writing a book on that one. I think the reason possibly is because there's nothing there to look at from 652. The second would be the Ibn Mujahid from 936, where the 7 readings were chosen. And the third one would be the Shatibi, I guess is the best way to pronounce it, in 1194, the 12th century. The fourth one would be Al-Jaziri, which he does refer to in this. He just kind of gives a reference to it in this video. And that would be 14. Fascinating. He never wants to put the date. 1429. That is the 15th century. That's 800 years after Muhammad. You have to put it on a timeline. And then, of course, the 5th canon would be this one in 1924. And he goes on and he says that this story probably is not... he thinks that I'm making it up. I don't know where he get that idea from, because I do write in my notes, and he says he looked at my notes. I do write where the source is, and the source is Gabriel Said Reynolds. In fact, I do mention that right on that video. I looked at the video quickly just now, and I do mention that this is Gabriel Said Reynolds, the Quran in its historical context, written in 2008. And then I also go on to refer to the Quran in Context, History and Literary Insights, Investigations into the Quran's Milieu by Angela Newworth and Nicholas Sinai in 2010. So this has been around for 10 and 12 years, Yasir Qadhi. Now, he may not like what I'm saying, but don't think that I'm making this up. I'm quoting these people. These are well-known scholars. Dr. Said Reynolds is Notre Dame University. He's considered one of the premier scholars in the world today on the Quran. Same with the Newworth and also Sinai. Argue with them if you don't like what we're saying, but we have to go to where the scholars are saying. And remember, he is correct. I don't do this research, but I make sure that I quote what other scholars are doing. And almost everything I'm quoting on the Qira'at now comes from Dr. Shadi Nasser, and I would love for him to have engaged at that point. He didn't want to. And then he gets into this notion, and this was really curious. He says that, and this is fascinating, because in that show, I look at the camera and I said, I'm making a statement right now that if King Fahd, the King Fahd edition, which was canonized, or which was chosen in 1985 for the whole world, and as the Hafs as a standard text, if this was happened in 1985, and at that time it was 34 years ago, now it's 35 years because this was over a year ago when I made this video, then I said it looks like that there was no standard in order to make all these 4,000 changes that Dr. Brubaker has come across. Now, what's fascinating to me, I said that, I looked at the camera, I'm making this claim here, that this all has had to happen since 1924. Now, since that time, and this is where, and I thank Yasir Qadhi. He was correct. I shouldn't have made that claim a year and a half ago, and I don't make it anymore. I'm very careful not to, just because. Can you see how idiotic that is? And in fact, I have said it a number of times in my videos that you cannot make that claim anymore. I did it a year and a half ago, but I can't make it anymore because there was no way that anybody could change it. So it's obvious to me that these changes had to be made possibly during the Ottoman Empire, when the Ottoman controlled many of these manuscripts. My assumption now is that these changes probably had to be made during the Ottoman Empire for two reasons. And this is now November, as I said, November the 26th. And I may have to change this. You're right. And Yasir Qadhi can slam me for it if he wants to. But this is where I'm asking for people to listen. I'm suggesting now that these changes have happened since the Ottomans came to power. So we're talking possibly 800 in the last 800 years. But I'm saying that for two reasons. One is because we do know that the Ottomans did choose the Hafs as their Qira'at. That's the Qira'at they favored. And that's why Muhammad ibn al-Husayni al-Haddad chose the Hafs in 1924, because it was the choice of the Ottomans. So if that is the case, then, and they would have controlled almost all of these manuscripts, 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th century, up until the 18th century, up until the 19th century, when the Ottomans in 1924, 20th century in 1924, when they lost their empire. If this is the case, then I would suggest that that's probably when all these changes happen. So we're talking about hundreds of years, over hundreds of years. But I'm doing that for a second reason, too. And I'm putting this out there. So don't get me and call me all calls and names, but understand what I'm saying. In order for the Ottomans to have done this, to have done these changes, there has to have been a standard. If the Hafs was their standard, then does that not stand to reason that this book Hafs is where all the other manuscripts are agreeing with this and not with these? They're certainly not agreeing with this one here, the Warsh. They're certainly not agreeing with this one here. These are the two most popular today. The Warsh is the one that is memorized and used all over North Africa. This is the one that has now been standard for the whole world. There are 5,000 differences between these two. 5,000 differences. And when you look at all these razm, these consonantal changes that Dan Brubaker is coming up with, as much as Yasir Qadhi does not like Dan Brubaker, listen, you can't just sit there and use vitriol against a guy who has a PhD in this area. This very area. This is his area. This is his PhD. You may not like him. And to say that he doesn't know Arabic, please. I mean, that's not only rude, but that is not proprietous. That's very improprietous to say that of another scholar. But nonetheless, saying that, to suggest, therefore, that this was done since the 1924, I have pulled back on that in the last year and a half, so Yasir Qadhi is correct. And what I'm now asking is, did this all happen since the Ottomans were empire, had their empire? Now, let's move on, because he then zeroes in on Daniel Brubaker. And I thought, Daniel's going to have to unpack every one of these and suggest, and this is good, because Daniel needs to do this. Now, Sidke, a guy named Sidke, has already written a long article. In fact, I think it's twice as long as the book that Daniel wrote on that book, on this book here. He's written, where do I put it? Here it is, right here. And he has written a long article with lots of vitriol in it, that's true. And Daniel has now responded to it. I just asked him last week. It is now with the publishers. It is coming out in a journal either this month, well, probably let's say December, either December or January. I don't know exactly what date it is. It's coming out. All of this will be answered. So Yasir Qadhi, just hold on. I understand. This is the difficulty with academic books. When academic books are written, and this is an academic book, it takes months for someone to confront it. Sidke is the first, and he only did it a year ago. And now Dan has responded to it, but he had a difficulty trying to get it published in the very same journal that Sidke wrote. They wouldn't. They would not publish Dan's reply. Isn't that odd? Isn't that rather odd? So now he's gone to another journal. So it's coming out. You're going to get it. This is the beauty of YouTube. You can get peer reviewed within minutes, as I'm doing right now. I'm peer reviewing good old Yasir Qadhi. And then he made a huge error. Yasir Qadhi made a huge error. He said that Dan claimed that he had looked at 10,000 manuscripts. Where in the world? He didn't say it once. He said it twice. These 10,000 manuscripts. Where in the world did he get this 10,000 manuscripts from? Daniel has never made that claim. We have never made that claim. I know of 10 manuscripts that he looked at, and there's more than that. But the 10 are the ones that he was doing for his doctoral thesis, where he found 800 differences, 800 completely differences with the consonantal text. And this has nothing to do with Qira'at. This has nothing to do with Ahruf. This has nothing to do with the 5 dots or diacritical marks or the 3 vowels. Okay, this is the razm. This is the consonantal. This is the skeletal text. That's why it's so damaging. And I went doing his doctorate for Rice University. Now, good old Yasir has no does not like Rice University, and he doesn't like Yale, that's for certain. He even says later on that that's where people get corrupted at Yale, as he got corrupted, though he got his PhD from there. That's hold on to that. 10,000 manuscripts. Yasir, I don't know where you got that from. I would suggest that you be careful how you quote Dan. He's never said 10,000 manuscripts. And he says, therefore, all of us, David, myself, and Daniel, we are UltraCrepidarians. They're people who don't know what they're talking about. UltraCrepidarians. I would suggest much of what you have shown from this video that you would also be part of the list. Come and join us. Yes, it looks like we're all UltraCrepidarians. So I'm probably going to title this an UltraCrepidarian response to Yasir Qadhi. Finally, he gets to the holes in the narrative. Finally, he got to this in the last few minutes. The very thing we've been waiting for him to talk about. And he said, listen, I made a mistake. And that's why he deleted it. He shouldn't have used certain words. And the only thing he's really talking about is the word holes in the narrative. That's all he wants to talk about. Because then he goes on and says that the tajweed new rules, these are nothing more than vowel pronunciations. And today that's true. They are vowel pronunciation, but they're in a written text. The 5 dots and the 3 vowels are to give you the delineation of which are the different ways to pronounce it. And see, what he's not thinking through, and this is what an awful lot of Muslims have not yet come back to us on, when Al-Bukhari, look at Al-Bukhari, volume 6, book 61, hadith number 510, when it says there that these Medinians who had gone up to the battle there in Azerbaijan, and when they were gone to the mosque and they were fighting alongside other Muslims who had come from places in Iraq, Basra, and Kufa, and also Syria, Damascus, they were all fighting together, and they would go to the mosque and they would then recite the Quran. And as these Hijazis from the Hijaz, that's the central part of Arabia where Mecca and Medina are located, when they heard the Quran being recited by these others, they heard different pronunciations, and they went to blows. They started fighting them. So Hudayfa has to come back. He runs back down to Medina, and he insists that Uthman standardize the text so they don't have many different Qurans, like supposedly the Christians and Jews have many different Bibles, is what they're saying there. Now, what's fascinating, what does Uthman do? He acknowledges it. He gets Zayd ibn Thabit to then rewrite the Quran in the Qurayshi dialect. This is the dialect that they claim, and we're coming out with lots of ideas about what this Qurayshi dialect is. Nonetheless, they're claiming that he then wrote it in the Qurayshi dialect, handed it to Uthman, and then Uthman sent it to 5 cities: Basra, Baghdad, not Baghdad, Basra, Kufa, and Damascus in the north, and Mecca and Medina there in the south, in the Hijaz. And then he took all the other manuscripts. Are you listening to this, Yasir? Dr. Qadhi, are you listening now? He took all the other manuscripts and burned them. So now stop and think. How can you burn pronunciation? Unless, of course, you have the dots and the vowels. You have to have the dots and vowels to be able to see a difference in pronunciation. If you're burning manuscript, you're burning paper. You're burning books. Help me here. Come back with me here. I've not seen any Muslims really respond to this. And this is something that Yasir Qadhi just said it really flippantly right off the top. This is nothing more than vowel pronunciation. This is nothing more than dialects. Okay, so they're dialects, but they have to be written on a paper. They have to be written in a dialectical form. And these dialectical forms have to have 5 dots and 3 vowels to understand the different dialect in a written text. That is what this is. And the first one is this guy right here, Ibn Amir. This is the first of those to be written in a dialectical form that is different. And he is from Damascus. And his date is 736. This is the next century. This is right well into the next century. And all these other ones, the 30 that are made official, they go all the way up until 912. The 10th century. So from the 8th century up until the 10th century, you have all these different dialectical forms that are written using the 5 dots and the 3 vowels. Yasir Qadhi, this could not have been a problem. This could not have been just dialectical differences in the 7th century, because there were no dots and vowels to make it understandable in a written text. Okay? Are you help me out with this, because this is something I've yet to see Muslims really respond to. How do you burn, therefore, pronunciation if it's just oral? Obviously, this is not oral. These are written. You burn books, you burn paper. That means it had to be written differently. And we know that these different writings do not even appear for another century. Well, 80 years. Okay? And then he says this is nothing more than different ways of saying wa or water. Wa. Well, okay, if that is so, you can pronounce it different. But how do you write that in a Quranic text? How do you write it in the Arabic script? Wa versus water. How do you do that in the 7th century when there's no dots and no vowels? Bingo. I think that's what I'm asking you. Then he talks about the fact that the corruption of Yale. Now, I don't want to go too much further because I would like to ask a number of questions, and I'd like to finish off. And I hope, Yasir Qadhi, you do respond to the questions I'm going to finish off with. You've only finished, I just only seen it a number of minutes ago. It's actually almost about an hour now since you finished you did your chat number 10. And I think that you've misconstrued what I've been saying. You also just dived into a video without looking at the context, and you didn't understand possibly that we were actually making a joke about throwing him into the Nile. And that also, that it was fascinating that if by doing that, with this, would you throw away? Would you? And the question we were asking is, if you're throwing him into the Nile, does that get rid of them? No, it doesn't, obviously, because we were making your very point for you, and that is there are thousands and tens of thousands of Qurans all over the world. Throwing him into the Nile does not do the job. Here's the questions. When and let me start with this question first. Here's the first question. These many qira'ats, which one of these is the one that's in heaven? Which one of these is the one that was revealed to Muhammad between 610 and 632, that 22-year period? Which one of these, and I just have 8 here, there's 30 of them, actually I have 9 with this one here. Which one of these is the one that Uthman commissioned Zayd ibn Thabit to write in 652? And that's what Muhammad Hijab was asking you. When he put his hand out there and he said, I'm giving you a blank sheet of paper, a blank mushaf. What Quran, which Qira'at, which Ahruf are you going to put there? He wasn't talking about pronunciation orally. He didn't want you to tell you what an oral pronunciation. He wanted to know what you were going to write there. Is it going to be the Hafs? Is it going to be the Warsh? Listen, just between these two right here, there are 5,000 differences. So which one of these? Is it the Hafs? Is it the Warsh? Is it Ibn Amir? Is it the Qalun? Ibn Kathir? Al-Qusay? Khalaf? Shoba? Al-Duri? Those are the ones I have here. Which one of those actually comes from heaven? Which one of those actually was the one revealed to Muhammad? That's the first question. Please answer that question. Okay, stop calling us names and all kinds of vitriol. That's not going to help. It doesn't help you academically. It doesn't help your authority before the world. And listen, most people see that when you go to vitriol, when you start using ad hominem, it usually means that you've lost the debate. And ironically, you really didn't talk about this. You didn't look at my videos on this. You didn't ask and even ascertain what I'm saying about the Qira'at. You never looked at one of those talks that I've done on it. And I've done 10, 20 of them already. Well, actually, since June 8th, probably only about 10 of them since June 8th. Number 2, what is it that happened to you at Yale University? Exactly what crisis did you go through? And why is it this idea that you have that if you go to Yale or Rice University, that these are not legitimate places? You got your doctorate there, so are you saying your doctorate's not legitimate if you say that you got corrupted by Yale? Please help us understand that. You talk about, and I remember in the video you said that there was, there are certain, you have a respect for the Quran, the Muslims have a respect for the Quran, and there's a line beyond which you don't go, a red line you refer to. We don't go beyond this red line. Well, we don't have red lines here in America, and you should know that. You live in Houston, you should know. You were at Yale. There is no red line at Yale. You can ask any question you want because that's what has been asked of our Bible. So I'm asking you these questions. What red line is it you can't go beyond, and why is it you weren't able to answer Muhammad Hijab in 25 minutes? He had to ask you twice. What are you going to write? Which one of these qira'ats is the one in heaven, the eternal one? Well, the obvious answer is none of them are, because none of them, there is no diacritical marks, there was no vowelization. for the one that's preserved in heaven. That was written, that was created by men. That was created by men after the 7th century. Bingo. Put that under your hat and see how you're going to run with it. Then thirdly, what are the holes you were referring to? If you said that I shouldn't have used that word, what holes exactly were you referring to? Because you actually were meaning something, and I would suggest those holes are the fact that for 1,000 years now, you Muslims have known about this. Listen, 736, 738, 770, all the way up to 812, all the way up to Ibn Mujahid, 936. Oh, don't stop there. Can you see? We're talking about over 1,000 years now you've had this material. And you did mention that for 1,000 years, this has been the most difficult question to answer. If it's the most difficult question to answer, then why all this vitriol against us when we ask the question? All we're doing is asking the question that should have been answered 1,000 years ago and should have been answered by you while you were at Yale. You've had 25 years to come up with a better answer than all of the Qurans are. All the Qira'ats are the Quran. That was your final answer after 20 minutes by Muhammad Hijab finally insisting. All 30 of them? Do you realize the team in London has already found 93,000 differences? Have you looked at all of those 93,000 differences? And that's just looking at 23 of the 30. They've already come up with 93,000 differences. The team in Australia has already found 5,000 differences between these two. Have you looked at all 5,000 of these? And are you saying that all those differences that do change the meaning, that do change the theology, that do in some cases change the practice, that these are all in the one that's in heaven? Can you see what we're this is the line that we know that, listen, this doesn't make sense to us listening. And you might say, well, that's because we're ignorant. Okay, call us ignorant, call us idiots, like you love to do. You're going to call me an idiot for even asking this question. But see, we have to ask this question because we do live in the West, and because this is causing so much damage to your religion, and it's causing so much damage to your murtads that you got so upset with them for even asking the question. And you're saying, do not disagree with us. Well, that's the red line. You're saying, do not go beyond this red line. You're saying to all these other murtads, God bless them for asking the question, because they need to know. They need to know, why is it that you have been saying for years and years and years and years, and you have said this for years, that there is not one word, there is not one letter that is different. You're the one that said that, Yasir Qadhi. You continue to say it. Or let me ask you this right now. Do you still believe that not one word or one letter has been changed? Help me here. Are you now going to apologize for that, for the many times you've said that? You have said that so many times on video. I noticed you didn't say it an hour ago. Why is it you're no longer saying it? Because you now know that you cannot say that. See, that's a red line that now has stopped you. That's a red line that you are now stopped. And remember what you did say in that interview on June 8th. The rest of the world has come leaps and bounds in the last 100 years. And they're looking at us like an emperor with no clothes. Until you answer these questions, you do, to us, look like an emperor with no clothes. Your own words, back at you. Please, get some clothes on. Start answer these questions. Stop talking about this red line which you can't go beyond. And stop saying that you have to take my class, then we'll do a deep dive, but you couldn't even answer Muhammad Hijab there in 25 minutes. And then I'm going to end with this. I want to know from you, Yasir Qadhi, when is the first complete Quran, that's just like this one here, not the English translation, I'm talking about the Arabic, the first complete Arabic Quran, all 114 surahs, when is the earliest that you can find? Give me a date. Tell me, where is that ubiquitous Quran that you're always talking about? Where is this Uthmanic manuscript that you're always referring to? Where is this manuscript that's 114 surahs and that every word and every letter is exactly like the one I have here? And I'm not talking about the Qira'ats. I'm not talking about the Ahruf now. I'm talking about the razm, the skeletal text, the consonantal text, what Dan Brubaker is coming up with. And he is the first to publish this. So don't sit there and wipe him across the table and say that this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. This is the first man that's had the courage to write and publish. And that's why you only have vitriol to throw at him. When you throw vitriol and ad hominem and the kind of words you use against Dan, against me, and against David, I can pretty well see that you really don't have answers to these questions. You really don't have answers. And all you're doing is throwing dispersions against us, the messenger. Okay, you now have been peer-reviewed. I hope I've done an adequate job of looking at the 51 minutes that you took. It's taken me about 34 minutes to respond to it. I'd love to hear a response to you. You said you're not going to have anything more to do with this, and you've done your bit. That's like somebody saying and yelling at somebody, and then they run away and say, no, I don't want to have to answer that. We got that at Speaker's Corner all the time. Muslims, when I would be on the ladder, they would come up to me, they would yell some stupid, idiotic things, call me all kinds of names, and then they run off because they don't want my response. You're acting like that. You're going to have to respond. You're going to have to respond to these questions. You're going to have to respond to huge amount of stuff that I have on the Qira'at. Look at my video that I put up a month ago, 2 hours long, and look at every one of those 5 canonizations that I went through referring to Shadi Nasr's material, and I want you to answer to every one of those. I'd like to see you do it. You say you're the world authority of this, or one of the world's authority on this. You're the one that has now gone public saying that there is not a problem, that it is completely preserved, that there has not been one dot. I'm sorry, you don't say one dot. Not one word, not one letter has been changed. Now, stand by it, hold to it, respond to these questions, and come back with me, and let's start this discussion. Okay, here I am on the 26th, Thursday the 26th, Thanksgiving, a Christian holiday, thanking God for what he has given us. And I thank God for you, Yasir. You're a great man. I really enjoyed that video that you did back on June 8th. I thought you were being honest. You really came across as being honest. You really did. And I love you for that. But you did make some huge, glaring admissions there. Those admissions you tried to shut down. You shut down all the comments. I just went up as soon as this happened, about an hour. It's not been over an hour. It's about an hour and a half now. I went up there and I wanted to look and see how many people are responding. And guess what? You shut the comments down again. In the very video where you sit there and attacking us right, left, and center, calling us all kinds of names, you shut down the comments again. I have never done that with my videos. If you if you can't take it, don't dish it out. If you can't take the vitriol, then don't dish out the vitriol. Make sure that you let people respond to you. Make sure that you look at the right videos and look at the right material and understand that we're learning from you. It's great that we're having the discussion. Let's make sure that you do come back on us, and let's see that you can answer these last 4 questions that I asked. Let me repeat them again. So which one of these is in heaven? Which one of these Qira'ats is in heaven? Which one is it? Which one are you going to choose? And don't say all of them, because they're all so different. And you can't have many different ones in an eternal tablet that has never been created. And what happened at Yale? What really happened at Yale that you say corrupted you? Or that it corrupts people? Maybe you're saying it generically. Where are these holes that you're referring to? What holes exactly are you talking about when you said you used the wrong word? Okay, so what did you mean when you talked about those holes in the narrative? And do you still believe that the Quran, this Quran here, has never changed? Not one word, not one letter has ever changed in 1400 years. Do you still believe that? Are you still saying that? Or now you're changing that? And you now admit that there has no proof. It has not been completely preserved. That there has been all kinds of human manipulation in the last, I'd say 1300 years, not 1400 years. And then, lastly, where is that first Quran? Where is that Uthmanic manuscript? Where is that first complete Quran that's exactly like the Qurans we have today? The Hufs that was referred to, that was chosen in 1924 in Cairo, 1936 in Egypt, 1985 by King Fahd there in Saudi Arabia. Where is that first one that it's exactly like that? What manuscript are you talking about? Is it the Topkapi? Is it the Samarkand? Is it the Ma'il? Is it the Petropolitanus? Is it the Husayni manuscript in Egypt? Or is it the Sana'a? Or is it some other one? Help me here. Come back to me here. Let's keep this open. Don't run away from me now. Please Let's make sure that we come to some conclusion on these questions. Okay then, this is Jay, here in my office. Having watched your video, now you watch mine, and let's keep this discussion going. All right, God bless you. This is Jay then, over and out.